Each January we celebrate the life, hard work, and dreams of the great American hero, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Why do you think it's so important that we remember him? What does the name Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. mean to you? When I think of Dr. King, I think of bravery, I think of justice, and I think of peace. You may already know that Dr. King taught people to stand up for themselves peacefully and to not use violence to get what they needed, what they wanted, and what they deserved. You may know that Dr. King worked for equal rights and that he was a leader in the civil rights movement. You may know that Dr. King had a dream for all people of all colors and races to live together peacefully. But did you know that sometimes even Dr. King needed help from kids like you? Let's take a look at some photographs. Who do you see in this picture? What are they doing? Is anyone else in the picture? What are those people doing? Just what do you think is going on here? How about in this photo? What's happening here? And here? Do you see what someone wrote on that piece of paper? It says, "Justice for all, now." Based on this photograph, who do you think needed more justice? Do you think these children are being treated fairly or unfairly? What makes you think that? The images we've been thinking about are found in the Children's Crusade of 1963 by Heather Adamson. We've been looking at photos of American children, Black American children, who were assaulted, arrested, and jailed by white police officers in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. It wasn't just 5 or 10 or 20 children who were arrested and assaulted. There were thousands. You might be asking yourself, how could this happen? Why would this happen? It wasn't an accident. Those children knew just what they were doing. They marched on the streets of Birmingham in peaceful protest for equal rights, and they went there to get arrested on purpose. That's right. These brave school kids got arrested on purpose. They needed to go to jail. Why would anyone need to go to jail? The answer to these challenging questions is complicated. It is. And I can help you start to understand what happened, but I really hope that you'll take the time to hear the stories from the heroes themselves. Mighty Times, The Children's March is an inspiring documentary full of interviews and first-hand accounts from the now grown activists who marched as children back in 1963. No kidding, I cried tears of joy. It's an amazing documentary. Let's dig a bit deeper and see if we can find out what happened during the Children's Crusade of 1963 and what the children accomplished through their actions. In the spring of 1963, Dr. King led peaceful protests against racism and oppression in Birmingham, Alabama, the most racist and segregated of American cities. Birmingham was home to many black Americans, but it wasn't a safe home for them. Dr. King and others had the bright idea to use peaceful protests to help people understand just how unfair and unjust black Americans were treated. He wanted people to have no choice but to see things for how they were. His idea was for lots and lots of peaceful protesters to get arrested on purpose. This would make things difficult for the racist people in charge of the city, and it would show Americans everywhere just how brutally and unfairly black people were being treated. It was a good idea, but Dr. King had a problem. Adults were afraid of being arrested, and for good reason. If adults were arrested, they could go to jail for a long time, and they could lose their jobs, and then they wouldn't be able to take care of their families. Dr. King didn't know what to do. That's when a radio DJ, a minister, and thousands of brave black students from local elementary, middle, and high schools in and around the city of Birmingham stepped forward to help. So what did the Children's March and the protests in Birmingham achieve? To understand the impact, let's take a look at the final chapter of The Children's Crusade of 1963 by Boost Civil Rights Books. Turning point. After the protests, people across the country couldn't open a newspaper without seeing the photos of children being blasted down the streets with hoses. The headlines were making the national news. Many U.S. citizens, including President John F. Kennedy, were not comfortable looking at pictures of children being mistreated. The Birmingham protests and arrests continued for a few more days. Birmingham business owners were losing money fast. People were not shopping downtown. Birmingham officials decided to talk with the movement leaders in a closed-door meeting. On May 10th, after long negotiations, the shop owners of Birmingham and the protesters reached a settlement. The Birmingham Truce Agreement called for an end to the protests. In exchange, restrooms, lunch counters, and other facilities would be open to people of all colors. And all white occupations, such as store clerks, would now need to be filled with black people as well as white. The children were released from jail. There was still work to do in Birmingham to protect and ensure equal rights for all citizens. But people across the nation realized peaceful protests could make a difference. They were inspired by the brave children who stood up for equal rights. And actually, just a couple of months after the Children's March, the very famous March on Washington happened in August of 1963. 250,000 peaceful protesters marched in Washington, D.C., and Martin Luther King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. To Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the thousands of peaceful black children who bravely stepped forward back in 1963, and to the millions of Americans who continue their peaceful protests today, thank you. Thank you for your perseverance, thank you for your dedication, and thank you for your dreams. I hope that you'll take the time to watch this documentary, and I hope that it inspires you much as it's inspired me, and that when it's done, you'll ask yourself what you can do to make a difference. What can you do to make this country a safer, better place where all people can feel free?